Call the meeting to order. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, be with us this evening as we do the business for the city and the community and the good and the welfare. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
This is going to be item C, approval of agenda. So this is the approved agenda for September 12th, 2022, regular planning commission meeting with the addition of item H.3 and H.4.
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Item D, citizens' comments. This is normally when we allow citizens to comment on anything they deem necessary. They would be allowed 3 minutes typically. They'd state their first and last name, where they reside. Everybody in the audience behind me is for an agenda item. So at this point, Mr. Chair, if you want, you may close this portion of citizens' comments.
Close citizen comments.
Very good. Item E, approval of the minutes. So this is the approve the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes from August 8th, 2022. Just a quick review. We had a sign variance case number VAR-22-2, which was for Goddard Wine and Spirits.
Make a motion to approve the planning commission regular meeting minutes of August 8th, 2022.
Thank you.
I'll second.
2 seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Very good. Item F, this is Board of Zoning Appeals. This is going to be item F.1, the lot split for 207 East First Avenue, case number SPLT-22-2. Quick background, Ward Hilliard has hired Savoy Company to survey and perform a lot split at 207 East First Avenue. The property is located at the northwest corner of First Avenue and North Cedar Street. Lot splits do not require publication, but they do follow the subdivision regulation guidelines under Article 12, Section 122. Final approval for lot splits is done by the Planning Commission and are recorded with the Register of Deeds. So Article 12.122, these are approval guidelines. No lot split shall be approved if, and then the black is the guidelines, and then purple is my answer to the guidelines. A new street or alley is needed or proposed. There is no streets or alleys proposed. A vacation of streets, alleys, setback lines, access control, or easements is required or proposed, and no vacations are required or proposed. No such action result in a significant increase in service requirements, utilities, school traffic control, streets, etc., or will interfere with maintaining existing service levels, additional curb cuts, repaving, etc. The proposal is to sell a second lot to build one new single-family detached home on a vacant lot, so impact is relatively minimal. There is less street right-of-way than required by these regulations or the comprehensive plan, unless such dedication can be made by separate instrument, and it does not impact the street right-of-way. This is the cut one lot into 2 lots, all private. All easement requirements have not been satisfied. All easement requirements have been met. Such split will result in tract without direct access to a street. All tracts have street access. A substandard size lot or parcel will be created. The lots will be split into 80 by 140 and 94 by 140. Zoning in R1 is 60 by 100 for the minimum, so both of them meet the minimum requirements. Such action will result in the lot being split into more than 2, except in industrial zones, and the lot will be split into 2 and 2 no more. So here's lot 1 and 2. Blue lines are water lines, green are sewer lines. So typically, the sewer would be running in the back of properties. They're in an easement. There's an alley back here, so instead of having easements, it's just running through an alley, which is considered public. Article 6.100.C2, accessory buildings shall be set back at least 3 feet from the rear lot line, except that garages with entrances facing alleys shall be set back at least 20 feet. So the detached garage is right back here, and it's dumping onto First Avenue, so it's not dumping into the alley. So it can be set back 3 feet, and it is set back 3 feet from the south lot line. Financially, none. Cost is carried by the property owner. The recording with the Register of Deeds will be done by the property owner or his or her representative. Legally, it's approved as its form. It is recommended that the Planning Commission approve the lot split application for 207 East First Avenue, case number SPLT-22-2. Mr. Lord, if you have any questions or if you want to address the Planning Commission, feel free.
I agree with Mike.
Short and sweet.
Discussion?
pretty cut and dry.
Any motion?
Make a motion that the planning commission approve the lot split application for 207 East First Avenue.
Second.
Who's seconding?
Second.
I'll take it.
There we
Very
go.
well. Thank you very much.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
This is item F.2, the lot split for 300 East 2nd Avenue, case number SPLT-22-3. Andrew Copen has hired Garber Surveying, which I don't think is in attendance there, not in attendance, to perform a lot split at 300 East 2nd Avenue. The property is located at the northeast corner of 2nd Avenue and North Elm Street. Lot splits do not require publication, but do follow the subdivision regulations under Article 12, Section 122. Final proof of lot splits is done by a planning commission recorded with the Register of Deeds. A lot of this is, as you've already been stated. Discussion about easements were started when it was noted that the sewer line ran through the adjoining neighbor's lots with no apparent easement. It was discovered through a title company, which we hired. There was an easement recorded in 1950 with those properties. Mr. Copen has agreed to dedicate a 10-foot easement to the city for the purpose of accessing the main from the side of the property. Public Works has determined that they can access the main from the east and no additional easement would be required. We'll go into this in a little bit more detail. So we're going to go through Article 12.122 and then we'll talk about the easement. No lot splits shall be approved if a street or alley is needed, as we've discussed. No new streets or alleys. A vacation of streets, alleys, or etc., setback lines, and no vacations are required or proposed. Such action result in a significant increase. So the proposal is to build 2 new single-family detached homes on the new lots being created. There's currently just a big vacant lot. Well, I think it's got 1 garage on it, but there's just a vacant lot otherwise. There is less street of right-of-way than required by his regulation or comprehensive plan, unless dedicated, and it does not impact street right-of-way. So all easement requirements have been satisfied. So all easement requirements are now being satisfied. The property to the east has a 20-foot easement over the sewer line, which a private service line can access. So typically easements are 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on another side, so the property owners are sharing it. 10-foot easement on one neighbor and 10 foot on another. The neighbor to the east has got a 20-foot easement. They're taking the whole easement responsibility upon themselves. And in fact, 300 East 2nd, if they were to run a private service line, it would have to run somewhere around 6-7 feet before it actually hits that easement. So that's kind of where the easement has been satisfied, because all of it is on the neighbor's side instead of it being on his side. This was mentioned to Mr. Copen, and he's willing to give us a 10-foot easement if necessary. And Harlan, feel free to speak if you wish on the matter. Brooke Brandenburg was supposed to be here, but he was sick. He's the Public Works Director. He said that they have plenty of easement already with the 20-foot easement on the neighbor to go ahead and manage and maintain that sewer line if need be. So he doesn't think that Mr. Copen needs that 10-foot easement, even though Mr. Copen is willing to give us a 10-foot easement if necessary. So that's kind of where I'm saying all the easements have been satisfied. If Planning Commission feels that is not a satisfactory answer, we could require Mr. Copen to give us 10 feet, and he is willing to do it at no cost to the city. It's just a matter if you think it is reasonable. So that's kind of where we're at with that matter. Tracks will both have street access. Lots will be split into 90 by 100 and 60 by 100. A zoning is R1, which allows 60 by 100 for the minimum. Such action will result in a lot split into more than 2 tracks. The lots are just being split into 2. And here is what we're speaking of. This is lot 1 and lot 2. This is currently 300 East 2nd Avenue is this property right here. There used to be a house here, I believe, and now it's gone. There is the remainder of a garage. This is lot 1, this is lot 2. Here's the easement. It is 20 feet. We did find it in a 1950 recording. We hired Security First Title. They were able to find it. I couldn't find it on the Register of Deeds, but they were able to find it. The water line is in the street, so these 2 properties will be either have access to North Elm, or they'll be dumping onto 2nd Avenue, but this one will be either one or the other. I see a little bit of a residual from the previous house, so I'm guessing this one could just dump onto 2nd, but they both have street access. This one is a little bit unique because obviously you see over here there's a garage on top of the easement. I'm not sure how that happened, but this house was built in 1950, so a lot of things happened back then. But here's the sewer line, as you can see. You can connect onto the sewer line from this easement, from this lot here. This lot will be a little bit more unique because they're probably going to either have to connect here under the fence onto this main, which is not uncommon, but they can't connect where that garage is. So they're either going to have to connect in front of the garage, or try to figure out how to swing a private service line. And you don't want any angles in a private service line for sewer, so they're probably just going to have to connect in the front right here in front of the garage. And this one will connect in the back, which isn't a problem. But as you can see, the whole easement is being is being assumed by this property owner here and this property owner here. But they are dedicated and they are recorded, so we have that 20 feet. If you, like I said, if you feel that's acceptable, these two lots can just connect here and here, that's fine, but also Mr. Copeland said he could give us 10 foot here if we want. Public Works said it's unnecessary, so it's just a matter of what you think is reasonable at this point for that. Financially, none. Cost is carried by the property owner. Legally, it's approved as to form. It is recommended the planning commission approve the lot split application for 300 East 2nd Avenue, case number SPLT-22-3. As mentioned, Harlan Foraker is here. He is the city engineer. He represents the city in engineering things. If you do have any questions, feel free.
How old are these sewer mains?
That is a good question. I have no idea. Old?
Probably 40 or 50 years, I'd suppose.
40 to 50.
Well, I mean, based on the way this line runs, there is no reason for the other two properties to assume any easement because it doesn't do any good.
That's kind of what Public Works was telling me. I want it to be reasonable. Typically, like I said, one property has half, no one has half. But we would be requiring something of Mr. Copeland that would not actually be utilized because all the work can be done in this easement on this line. Public Works is saying that they're not going to dig 6 feet away from the line to access the line. They're going to, it's going to be right there, maybe a foot or 2 feet on each side. So it would, if there was any digging at the smallest width between this lot 1 and here, they wouldn't even cross over into lot 1 to do the work. So I'm not sure. And then again, it's always nice to have more easement for a city's perspective because then you can have more control for any type of maintenance, hypothetically. But nowadays, and Harlan, this came up, and I thought maybe you'd comment on it too, but Public Works has mentioned that typically on the older lines, nowadays the technology is that you would just shoot some kind of concrete foam through the pipe and it actually creates a PVC inlay inside of the pipe instead of having to excavate it and remove the whole pipe. So for some of these older pipes, it's actually something that Mayer does, where they will shoot something through the pipe, and it'll solidify on the inside of the pipe, creating basically a smaller diameter, but it creates a PVC casing on the inside of the pipe using that type of technology, so that they don't even have to excavate that pipe if the need be. Granted, I don't think we've ever tried that before, so I don't know how that would play out in reality, but it sounds nice.
It's actually a fiberglass liner that they pull
Okay.
They wad it up and they pull it through and then they blow steam through it. It expands this, what they call the sock, and cures the fiberglass in the sock and actually sets up, and we've done it in several small communities, or even City of Wichita does it to repair old clay tile line pipe that joints are offset and you obviously have leaks and tree root intrusion and that sort of thing.
And I think that's probably what
It can be done.
You would probably do that at this garage point, I'm guessing, because you're not going to want to dig into the basement of this garage, so they'd probably just shoot that through and go underneath it so you don't have to excavate that portion.
But he hopes we do that.
Yeah.
I think that they need to give a 10-foot easement because I'm assuming that there's overhead power lines.
There are power lines, there are property, but there is AT&T and there's a power line around here. That's all private.
But once you sell those 2 lots and build houses, there's probably going to be a fence. Then will they still be able to get back there? Instead of having an open lot, they could have a fence on both of them.
A fence, talking about going across here, there'd be a fence?
No, I'm talking a 10-foot easement in the back because once the lots are sold and whatever they do with them.
There's a fence here currently. There's a fence that runs
Oh, is there?
north-south. Uh-huh. Anytime we need to get to an easement, we would just knock the fence down.
You can build on your easement.
Yeah, there's certain things you can build on an easement. Fences are one of them. Not permanent properties, we don't, but you can put a shed on an easement if it can be moved. If there's a fence on an easement, we would just knock the fence down. We would repair the fence, but we just knock it down. It's not considered a permanent, structure on an easement. In fact, we encourage people to place fences on the easement because that way there's no confusion about property rights. In Kansas and other states obviously have pretty stringent laws for property rights, but we want that fence to run right in the middle of that easement to separate 10 feet, 10 feet, and so that there's no confusion about who owns what portion of that property. And so that fence is currently running north-south right here, and we can get to that no problem,
Okay.
or at least that's what Public Works tells me. So I imagine they're experienced in the matter, and
That
they,
idea tech hits your hood.
They've already hit my hood.
So fence is not an issue.
No,
Going
But
one
you're-
way or another.
your water lines on your lakes are.
Those don't dig.
So I guess the question is, I mean, this would be the time to add one if
Yes.
you want it, right?
certainly, yeah, and like I said,
And
the
is
property
there-
owner is more than willing to give us one. Granted, I'm not sure how far away this garage is from that fence line, so if we did have a 10-foot easement, it might go underneath that garage, and so if we wanted to draft an easement, it might have to be a little odd.
Mikey, we might just suggest that we just get an easement up to the foundation of that, so
Of that garage?
so that we don't create an easement that actually
Yeah.
then creates a problem for
Like we
that
have right
structure.
here. Right,
So I mean,
right.
if it's 8 feet, let's maybe get 8 feet if that's what you feel strongly
Yeah,
about.
then that's,
You know.
I think, I'm sorry. I think now would be the time to
Okay.
establish the easement. Generally, if they're underneath the structure, and I've ran into this before, you would abandon that section of it and want to jog around it in the
Mhm.
future,
Yeah.
opposed to doing the fiberglass insert. So I think, while we have the opportunity, rather than have to visit it later. I don't know the age of that structure, and maybe it's not going to be there in 20 years, I don't know, but I think we have to kind of assume that it will be, and it'd be easier in the future if we did have that extra little bit of space
sure.
to make that jog in the,
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Because, I mean, currently they're willing, but if that lot sells to someone who's not as willing to be, give up that space.
Mhm.
but I think Arlen's right, make it up against that foundation so we don't,
Have a jog, just,
so there's no hardship to them if it ever has to be
yes.
opened up.
So we'll just say run parallel basically to that garage, just have it go north-south right here.
Michael, we're just talking about lots 1 and 2.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
What's on the north property right there, there's another white line that runs north and south. What is that?
I only hired security first to look at this lot, which is current, this one and this one. I'm not sure where this goes north. There might be an easement recorded on this one and this one. But since this was just dealing with this one and they would most likely connect here, they're probably not going to run it up here for that private service line. So I just asked for easement searches on these properties right here. So I'm not sure what this looks like further north and even past this block further
See
north.
that white line, like, what is that supposed to indicate?
A lot of things happened in the past, and it's difficult to determine sometimes. I mean, even with the surveyor, even with Garber who was surveying this, they were running into some awkward situations with legal descriptions and trying to figure out, who owned what part of the property, because when there was condemnation for the streets when they went in, and it just kind of got a little awkward, because there'd be one thing that was recorded, but there's another thing that was described on the survey, and so it got a little weird there. But they're going to go off of the legal description for the register of deeds and basically what's been deeded to the property owner. But further north, it can get, this is sort of the domino effect, right? We find this and we just follow that string, start pulling on it, and we see that sewer line goes magical places, and so that's kind of where it can get a little difficult, because then we're starting to clean up things as we go ahead further and further north. But for now, for these two properties, he could connect here and we could ask for that easement for anything else that might come up, which, like I said, he's willing to give us to. But this, I'm not sure how that got split out.
Micah, this applicant doesn't own that house?
No.
North of lot 1?
No, this is the lot right here.
Okay.
This is the lot right here, and he's just splitting it right here. So lot right here. And those lines kind of washed out, but there's a white line right here. So this lot and this lot. And this one is a separate property owner. Yeah, and it looks like they were trying to do something here, but I'm only speculating.
What
I
is
don't know if
that
that's
odd,
fence.
that odd little piece of, yeah.
Yeah, that's what Commissioner Hall was asking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
it's just, we're not sure. I mean, obviously it's listed as a separate parcel per the county, but
It
For
goes
what?
right through a detached
Because
garage.
it does, that's what I was noticing.
yeah, there's, like I said, a lot of things kind of start to, over time, things get overlaid on top of each other, and It's difficult to clean them all up. Surveying in 1950 is different than surveying now, and it's just things kind of get a little odd when you start going back in time. But for now, I would say the easements are satisfied because he can build the properties he wants. It connects to the service line. But we can ask for that easement if that's the plan commissioner's wish. We can ask for an additional easement to, more easements always is favorable to the city, so.
Might save headache down the road for somebody, so
Yeah.
I would agree with putting it up to the foundation.
So then that would be, it is recommended the planning commission, it'd be approve the lot split application for 300 East Second Avenue, case number SPL T-22-3, contingent upon a recorded easement up to that foundation.
Have a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the lot split with the additional easement up to the foundation of the
Detached garage.
existing garage.
Very good. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Item G, old business, there is none. Item H, new business. So this is item H.1, Goddard Genesis Development Preliminary Replat. So a quick background, Certified Engineer and Design, CED, has submitted an application for replatting the Goddard Genesis Development. The replat would increase the total lot count from 5 lots to 12 and would help distinguish lots that will have ad valorem tax applied compared to those that have been abated per the development agreement. The replat will also help place essential city infrastructure and dedicated easements for the purpose of long-term maintenance by the city and will help distinguish these easements from reserves that will be used for detention ponds to be maintained and owned by the developer's property management team. The city follows the platting process for replatting the same way it would for new plats, requiring both a pre-plat and a final plat. With changing design plans comes a necessity for a revised stormwater engineering study, which is being reviewed by the city engineer. A pre-plat and a final plat can be considered concurrently within the same meeting. Final plats must go before the city council for a final decision. So the planning commission is considering approving a preliminary replat for the Genesis Sports Complex Edition. This is item H1. The replat for 8 lots to 12. Revised storm water management. Land use is commercial. Gross acreage is 87. Square footage is about 3.7 million. So this is the northern half of the replat. There's a lot of details, so I strongly encourage you to reference your agenda item to zoom in on some of these details. This would be the second portion of that replat. There are some small conditions on this that have required CED to change, which they have complied with, and some of them that they recommended themselves, which I think was essential. But basically, I asked for a dark solid line on the replat area, which will be on the final. Just make it stand out a little bit more. R/W on the plat to call out the right-of-way dedication, which they've done. It's on the final, which will have text stating that the building setback lines dictated on this plat, either proposed or as is, shall govern in accordance with Article 3.103B for the zoning regulations of the Code of the City of Goddard, Kansas. So with this change and the replatting and the lot splits, especially with the hotel, which was required by the bank for the funding of that hotel, not all of those may or may not comply with setbacks. So to kind of clear that out, under Article 3, we're allowed to dictate what the setbacks would be to supersede the zoning if it's platted that way. And so that's what this is calling out, to help remove any sort of non-conformity with setbacks. And so that would help kind of outline that. And then removing depicted access easement, and which will leave it on the platter's text as perpetual access easement for all lots, both now and in the future for this development. And so as this development was merging and morphing, and basically there was some concern about how these lots would have access to the streets, because you don't want to create lots that don't have street access. And so what we've done is they've created this access easement that runs up and down and around so that it connects all the lots to the Crown, and Grand Slam is right here and Crown Drive is right here. This easement connects them all. What's mentioned by CED, which I think is actually a good point, is that even though this easement follows the proposed private drive for the development, if this proposed private drive were to change or morph in some way or be changed in any particular way and it was outside of that easement, it creates a sort of an issue there. And so what we would do is simply remove this easement outline, but leave it on the platter's text that any private drives that exist within this development will be granted to all the lots, both now and in the future. So that way, if the easement changes, instead of just having it be changed here, where you have maybe, if there was a, let's say, a private drive that punched in here, instead of saying, well, that does not conform with the easement, we simply remove the whole easement and put it on the platter's text, which will be on the final plat, saying that all the lots have access to that, no matter where it is. And that way, it resolves that issue of, do these lots have street access or not? Well, they all do, according to the plat, which helps clean that up, which is a good recommendation by CED. There is one final issue which will be brought up, and as mentioned, Harlan is here and Martin Haney, the architect for the developer, and we will talk about it. And so it's a little lengthy, so just keep in. But right here in the southwest corner, we have two access points. One of them is off of First Avenue, but just across from First Avenue. The other one is across from Santa Fe. There was some concern about the second one being across from Santa Fe based on the amount of traffic volume that's going to be exiting the development and potentially turning south. If they were to come out of this development over here and then come out this way, they'd be too close to the trail. That was the concern of some of the city staff. And that distance is roughly around 60, 70 feet between the drive and the Prairie Trail, according to mobile land records, which may or may not be quite 100% accurate, but that's 60 or 70 feet, give or take. And so the concern was that if people were dumping left out of this potential development over here, they'd be too close to the Prairie Trail where they have bikers and pedestrians. So the idea was to move it, about another 200, 300 feet away, give or take. Remove the drive here and push it somewhere over here, and then allow parking to be moved and morphed as necessary. But that raised some concerns about sort of unequal access onto 199th, where you have about 350, somewhere between 320 and 350 feet between these separations here, and over here you only have about 175. And so that would create this unequal staggered access on the 199th. And so another proposal was to push the drive even further so that it's across from Second. But that would create some issues here for these if this was ever platted in the future. It's currently not platted for lots now, but in the future, it was with this development building out, any unused land has the potential to be sold as for future development. And so that could potentially cause this area over here to be less desirable if that drive is cutting it off instead of allowing it to be split as necessary, sort of an as-built lot for future development. So that's one of the concerns that came up there. Financially, there is none. Legally, it's approved as the form. It is recommended the Planning Commission approve the preliminary replat for the Goddard Genesis development contingent upon final ingress-egress as mentioned on the 199. Access control management. And at this point, Harlan, if you want to come and talk about that a little more, feel free. Here's your pointer. All right.
How do you point, which one is it?
That one over there, and then you just hit the, there you go. Perfect. And you can always hit back if you want to go back to that map.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Harlan Foraker with Certified Engineering Design. I've been to several of your meetings here, but appreciate the opportunity to discuss the plat this evening. You may be aware, a little bit of just brief history is this was originally platted as the Goddard Aquatic Center back in 2015, I believe is when it was. And it's been through about 3 different developers, maybe 4. And so now we're finally on one that I think's pointed the project in the right direction, and we can maybe see the finish line here getting close. So with that plat, there were a lot of utility easements platted more specifically to whatever that use was going to be. And obviously that has changed with the new developer and the site plans that were proposed. So the city wished to have a lot of those easements cleaned up because we put sanitary sewer and water lines in to serve the existing development, in different areas based upon their site development proposals. So that along was one of the primary reasons for the replat, to get those old easements vacated by virtue of the replat and then dedicate the new easements where we now know we have the city has actual facilities, water and sewer lines. So, then the creation of the 8 additional lots. Have not been involved with the Starbond development agreement, but according to the Starbond, some language, some of the parcels like the hotel is under a different ownership. That was created for the hotel because I guess that's under a different, lender, I think, and then maybe under a different, since it's under a flag of I'm not sure who it's under, but anyway, you know, they obviously want to have a specific lot for that. So the other lots were created because there, I think Micah mentioned, there are some potential maybe tax abatements that might grow out of, not grow, but are contained in the Star Bond Development Agreement. And so those would need a separate tax key number so that the treasurer's office can assess them, whatever is appropriate for them to be assessed. So that's why the additional lots have been created that Micah had shown on the plat there. So, and just so you know, I mean, we essentially took one lot of the original Goddard Aquatic Center and then replatted it. We're replating it, and we into lot one. And then these additional, there's a lot here for the hotel. There's a lot here for the natatorium. There's a lot here for the water sports, and then a lot for the baseball diamond, a lot for the softball diamond, and then a lot for the sand sports, I guess is what that's being called. And this is Martin Haney. He's the architect for the developer there, so he can maybe share some more details with it. But we have pretty much worked with Micah through this process in answering his questions and resolving any issues. The drainage plan, we actually think it may result in less drainage than what we'd originally proposed. The original study was done back in 2019, or the design was actually done back in 2019. So we think we've complied with most everything. We do like the idea of back to the easement. I think Micah did a good job. We had initially shown an easement coming off of Crown Drive here, and Grand Slam Way, you know, to connect all these lots so that each lot would have access through lot one to get out to a public roadway. And Micah pointed out, you know, if for some reason they'd add more parking or something, this might change. So we decided to, let's just do away with the easement, and we'll say that this lot one, which is kind of odd shaped, you know, grants ingress and egress easement to any and all lots that are being replatted, and then any future lots that might be created. So that pretty much gives carte blanche to any of the lots in here to have access through lot one, because lot one abuts a public right-of-way and can pretty well get back to a public street and then drive through the parking and or drive through the drives that have been created and the parking to get to any of these lots that were created. So with regard to this south access, I'm going to let Micah or I'm going to let Martin address that. But what I would say is, I guess putting my city engineer hat on here, my concern would be, I'm not being able to get it to go forward. Is it not? There it goes. There it goes. From a traffic engineering and transportation engineering perspective, it's best to have these intersecting roadways line up, because you potentially just create another possible conflict between the oncoming traffic and this north and southbound traffic. So I personally, and I guess professionally, think having the access down here to line up with Santa Fe and First is the best place to have it. Because if you put it mid-block, you're going to create another potential spot of conflict here with oncoming traffic that's traveling north and south. So I really don't have any objection. I understand the concern here of it being close here, but again, maybe that conflict or that concern already exists, because Santa Fe, you know, the traffic turns out onto Santa Fe headed southbound is going to conflict with the linear trail people crossing. I mean, I think there's good signage. Is there a flashing light there on 199?
There is. I guess there is.
Is there? I think there's a flashing light here, you know, so obviously, yes, the people pulling out here, the majority of the movement may be, you know, back to the north to get to 54 to go to their homes, east or west, wherever they're going. But there still may be some vehicles that might go south as well on 199. So anyway, if you were to so decide that this was an acceptable location, which was where we show it on the plat right now, if you were willing to approve that, I think that makes the most sense as far as reducing potential conflicts with the 199. street west traffic. So anyway, those are the major issues, and I'll let maybe Martin address his need for that access point.
I'm Martin Haney, I'm the architect, I caused all the trouble. Kind of what Harlan was saying, the history behind having the second lane was more fire department related, and it was also giving another point of egress from the site. Earlier this summer there was a weather event that didn't really hit Goddard, but they had a baseball tournament going at that time, and they called off the games, and there's about 600 people at the baseball stadium that all had to leave. They were all going out Crown Drive, and
That flash drive's got a lot of stuff
oh, should I tell you which?
on it. Probably should, yeah.
Oh.
Do you want to pull it up now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let us know which one it is, so let's pull it up. Site mission, he's got a lot of details he wants to present, so we want to make sure that we adequately present it.
Basically, do the bike. The fire truck, the bike path, we'll do those. But the traffic trying to get out the north was backed up, and there really wasn't another access. When we first applied for phase one, which is the baseball, fire department had asked for the second egress going to Goddard Lane, so that was coming in. What we looked at was kind of the same thing with Sand Sports, that as people come out to go to Goddard Road from the baseball, we thought it'd be a good idea to have another access point into Sand Sports. If there was an accident or something that happened up there, there's no way to get out. I'll go back to the picture, but this is images of that bike trail. I went out and measured it, and from the north side of Santa Fe to the bike trail, it's 84 feet. And we thought, well, our drive's going to be smaller than Santa Fe. If we push it to the north, we could probably gain another 10 feet. The thing that's noticeable is that a bike would come up right to the edge, and you have sight lines going both north and south, all the way up to Kellogg, and quite a ways down to the south. So I thought, a car 84 feet away, if you're on a bike, you can see if they're coming out or not. It's not like it's hidden behind trees. So I thought from that standpoint, it's very safe. You've already got lights north and south. From just a brief time I was out there, people that approached would actually stop and let you cross. So I didn't see it as a particular issue. I thought that you have the line of sight between them and the driver, that you're close enough. It aligns with the street. I think there was some concern about the volume of traffic that would be coming out that drive. I have 164 spaces for Sand Sports. The baseball is going to use the north one. It's just easier line of travel. Kind of go forward, I guess. So this kind of shows, how do I do the laser pointer like that?
Red, middle,
Oh, okay. So we'd line up with this north edge and come in over here. This is the bike trail where it becomes gravel on this side, and it kicks over, as you can see. But from this point to that was 84 feet, is what we've got. So if we lined up with the middle and came on this side, we'd probably gain at least another 10 feet. The concern, one of the concerns expressed was that if a truck was in our drive, the bikers wouldn't be able to see past it. But if they pull up to the edge of Goddard Road, like I say, you can see past anybody that would be in that way. Kind of like this is if you had your bicycle pulled forward. Thought I had a diagram. There's the two PDFs of the fire truck, the bottom two.
Martin, I might mention too, I mean, there are a couple utility poles there. Obviously, those would have to be relocated as part of that
You
drive.
let the construction equipment take those out.
Okay. No,
Okay. In a
the
controlled
right
fashion.
kind.
In a
Yeah,
controlled
the right
fashion.
kind.
So what kind of got this started was that incident, that weather event with baseball and the fire department. So we were looking at the turning radiuses of fire truck if they came in, or an emergency vehicle. That by having this, they have simple movements coming through. If we were to eliminate the south drive, then it becomes a little more of a challenge. Kind of like me and the pointer. There goes the next one. Then the fire truck has to do all of its maneuvering within the parking lot, or we have to have a hammerhead turnaround. It can be done, but you're making it a little more of a challenge as far as getting through. From a safety standpoint, I thought having the second lane And I'm spending the owner's money to achieve that, but I thought it made the safety aspect of the site better by giving, like I say, if there was an incident here and it was closed off, people had the option, they could come down here. I don't see the majority of the traffic coming down. As Harlan said, I see the majority of the traffic, at least at this stage, going to the north, especially with the R-cut that's being considered for the site. As people go up Crown Drive, it's my understanding, I haven't seen the final design, but they can't go back west like if they're going towards Goddard. So having another vehicle way to get into the city, I thought was advantageous as well. So that's kind of where that second drive came from. We obviously want to be very protective of the folks that are using the trail. The time I was out there, there was 4 or 5 people, and I wasn't there very long. So it's getting a lot of use, which is good. Any questions? Now all your presenters run back and forth. I'm sure.
The tree runs out on both sides of that bike path. Is that bike path property or who's?
It's definitely off of ours. There's must have been a railroad easement.
Right,
And it was
there's this plat goes down to and lies immediately on the north old railroad right of way. So, and I don't know off the top of my head if that's a 50 or 100 foot. I know west of 199th it's quite wide, but east I think it narrows down to whatever the tree line to tree line you mentioned. It could very well be 100 feet. I don't know.
Kind of looks like it, or at least 75 compared to the street.
That looks like to me to be more of a visible issue for anybody coming off the bike path, you know, as far as being blocked from the south. More, I mean, there's more trees on the south side of that than you can see, you know, vehicles coming out of a new driveway.
Right.
I noticed, Martin, I might ask, your sketch, did it show this road south approach actually being a little bit narrower than maybe the main approach onto First? Was that intentional, or did you, or is it more of a minor?
We made it tighter, but I think I had it on that drawing. I had it aligned centered on the street, and it wasn't until this came up I started thinking, well, if we moved it over,
I'd rather see you have it lined up straight.
Yeah, from the traffic movement standpoint.
Right. And is there a field entrance there right now? You see right there, point your pointer there, just to
that
the
looks
north
like it
of the
was
trees.
something.
There's something there.
I don't know that we have done that.
No, those are the bush hogs that go in there.
Oh,
To clean it up. Okay.
Yeah, that's the bush hog trail.
Okay.
Those volunteer trees in there are tremendously difficult.
It doesn't take them long.
No, they grow really fast.
I'm with you. I mean, I feel like an exit or a west exit out of the property would be advantageous to the city. Because there's still a lot of businesses downtown that are going to, benefit from people that are going to the Genesis or to those other deals.
I think that's all we have, Mike.
Oh, yeah, feel free. Well, gentlemen, at this point, this is just a matter of approving the preliminary plat, and then the second item would be the final plat, but obviously deliberation would be for access on the 199th being the contingent factor here. We have obviously the First Avenue connection here. You could limit it to just one access here, 2 access points, or 1 access and another access here. Move the second access. Whatever recommendations you made will go before the city council, and city council will make final deliberation on if they how they want to have access on the 199 Goddard Road.
And Micah, just for clarification, we are currently not showing an access to Second.
No.
Right, so all we're
No.
showing is one to First and
First
one
is
down
right
here
here,
to
and
Santa
Santa
Fe.
Fe's right here.
Right.
So this is the one that's really under deliberation. First, there's no contention here at all. The question obviously would be, are we moving this off of Santa Fe to somewhere in the middle, which has the concerns that were raised about that, or are we going to push it back onto Second? There's currently a culvert right here for when that was anticipated. This is a little deceiving right here. This is actually when we had paid addition go down, and the contractors were nice enough to pave this for us, not pave it, but grade it, excuse me, so to get paid addition out of there, they came across there. So that's why it's showing up on the contours that way, because they basically, when that power line went down at paid addition, there was only one way in and one way out, and so we had to do an emergency access way onto this dirt road here, and the contractors were able to grade it for us rather quickly, which we were really grateful for, because there was no way out of pay, everyone was stuck. And so this showing up on the contours. So.
And Micah, I think the fire department has accepted that as their emergency access, fire access, currently, just a temporary.
Right.
A temporary fire.
Obviously, they'll be taking this if they needed to, or this if the planning commission feels that's acceptable. But this one right here is their current temporary emergency access should the need arise.
I think we definitely need that second access point, and I would rather see it line up with Santa Fe than I would be an offset.
Yeah.
Because if somebody coming out that one and they want to go to Santa Fe, you're coming across left and then have to turn right and just flow of traffic. Sure would slow it down, so.
I'd just say I use the trail, well, I don't use the trail as much as I used to, but it's easier to spot one intersection than an intersection with another intersection a little further up. People are going to run you over no matter what, so.
I like it, it's a straight shot. The new coffee shop and stuff right here.
I don't see anything, but there's nothing coming out of the east end or the east side of the paid addition that connects to that.
No, paid addition's completely closed off, other than one access point on the 199th. At one point, Pate we were looking at extending Cindy Street in Pate to the frontage road, but that was met with some disdain and consternation from the paid addition. So that was before my time, but that's my
Yeah,
understanding.
that was
One of the issues that we had when the power line went down I think that was 2021, the power line went down, so it blocked that entrance into Pate, so. But there's no current access from Pate to the dam. There's a tree row that's totally separate.
when they wanted to take Cindy to the Kellogg Drive, we had an audience that night.
That was my understanding from the minutes.
I think they call that a full house, didn't you?
Bring your tomato suits.
I'll make a motion, we approve the preliminary replat for the Goddard Genesis development contingent upon the final ingress, egress, access control, that's what we decided, right?
Off of
Santa Fe.
Off of Santa Fe. Thank you very much.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. So currently the recommendation will be to approve the final plat, which will be on item H2, with it's two access points on the 199th, one off directly across from First Avenue, the other one directly across from Santa Fe. Very good. Item H2, this is the Goddard Genesis Development final replat. Since we covered everything in the pre-plat, this one is going to be basically a rinse and repeat, but it's a separate agenda item, so we have to go through it. But all of this is the same. The same. This is a new final plat. Obviously, a lot of everything that's on the pre-plat doesn't get recorded with the registry of deeds, so it gets cleaned up, and now you're just looking at a clean final plat. No contour lines or building footprints or anything else. This is just parcels, easements, reserves, things of that nature. With a lot of signature blocks and platter's text.
And we will be removing the easement from this final
Correct.
plat.
Yeah, for the discussion. But we'll keep it in the platter's text.
Right.
As mentioned, as Harlan just mentioned, we'll remove this, but it'll be kept in here. That all these lots have access to any private drive.
Can you explain that one more time to why that makes it easier?
It makes it easier because right now you have right now you have it shown on the plat as an easement right here, but it's static, so that means it just stays there. So right now, if you were looking at this plat, you would say, okay, there's a private drive that runs like this. There's a private road that runs through this whole thing.
Right.
In the future, if they were to punch a road, let's say hypothetically here, a private drive here, it's no longer in that easement. And so that means that that would be a complete private road that technically these lots should not have access to.
Okay.
But if we remove this static line easement here, but just say here, hey, if there's any private drives in this whole development, all lots have access to it.
Okay.
That way, if any of those private drives move or shift or change, it still says all these lots have access to it. That means all the lots have street access, which is the big key here, because we don't want to have any lots that don't have street access.
Okay.
Technically, that'd be a non-conforming lot in violation of subdivision regulations. So having that easement in there, in the platter's text, just makes it easy. If any of these private drives shift in any way, it says it doesn't matter, everyone still has access to it.
Okay.
That way you don't have to do a vacation at a later time. For example, hypothetically, if this went away, if this line went away and they said, you know what, we do want it to go, punch it straight in the paid edition, we won't do that. But hypothetically, if they did and they wanted to get rid of this would have to go through a vacation. And so that's kind of what, to avoid all that, we simply say all existing private drives all lots have access to it,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yes.
Financially, non-legally approved as the form. It is recommended that the planning commission approve, what happened there? Did I go too fast? What happened to my items here? Well, I lost it, but anyway, it would be approve the final plat with that access point on to 199 across from First Avenue and Santa Fe. Sometimes some of my slides get lost.
I'll make a motion to approve the final plat with the access point out in Santa Fe and First Street.
Very good.
I'll second. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Martin, at this point, you're welcome to stay. Or have a good evening.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks, Martin.
What's going on here? You're missing some slides. Disconcerting. My clicker, Badger. Well, item H2 and H3 are generally the same. I'm missing some slides here, but we're gonna have to take this as a preliminary plat and then, oh no, we're fine actually. This should go through. Let me just make sure I got it. There they are. Okay, so I'm just gonna backtrack it here. Okay, so this is item H3, the Arbor Creek Phase 3 preliminary replat. Quick background, MKEC Engineering has submitted an application for a replat of a portion of the Arbor Creek development. This replat will add 2 new lots and allow for walkout basements in and around the second entrance location onto 23rd Street. The city follows the platting process for replatting the same way it would for new plats, requiring both a pre-plat and a final plat. With change in design plans comes a necessity for a revised stormwater engineering study, which is being reviewed by the city engineer and MKEC. A pre-plat and final plat can be considered concurrently with the same meeting. Final plats go before city council for a final decision. So analysis, the planning commission is considering approving a preliminary replat for Arbor Creek Phase 3. The replat will be for 44 lots. It'll be a revised stormwater management control. Land use is single family detached only. Current and existing zoning is R1, so none of that is changing. The plats, or what it's currently platted as 42 lots for Phase 3. They're switching out to 44. So here's Phase 1. And this is Phase 2, which is currently under construction. Phase 1 is under construction as well, but Phase 1 is pretty much done. Now we're moving into Phase 2. This is Phase 3. As you can see, there's access right here off of 23rd. The questions that come before the Planning Commission today have to do mostly with stormwater detention. Once again, Harlan Foraker, who represents the city, will speak on that if you do have any questions on it. They're proposing an off-site detention pond here to help manage some of that stormwater as is required. With that introduction of off-site detention, they will be allowed to put in 2 more lots to manage that impervious surface. This is a perennial stream that runs through that captures a lot of stormwater. We had a property owner here who mentioned and sent me a picture of the stormwater close off a footbridge. That has been conveyed to MKEC. They're taking that into account as part of that proposed detention. This is the preliminary plat, which there's a lot of details. Once again, it's easier to zoom in on your agenda item. You'll see here, this is what they're proposing, that detention pond. Financially none, legally it's approved as to form. It is recommended the Planning Commission approve the preliminary replat for the Arbor Creek Second Edition contingent upon final stormwater management engineering requirements. We do have Joey Deneke of MKEC here, represent the developer, if I believe it.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, Micah.
You're very welcome.
Good evening, Joey Deneke with MKC Engineering, agent on behalf of the applicant. The applicant is here today if there's any other questions, but just to kind of recap, let me go back here. So this was the existing Arbor Creek plat there. Micah mentioned that's phase 3. If you looked at the existing plat with the proposed plat, there's not much that's really changing. So the driving force to this replat is, you can see over here on the east side, adjacent to the 183rd Street, there's a little open space. It was a reserve. So initially they kind of wanted to have a little open space buffer between the road there. Although after kind of further review, the intentions were to expand these lots a little bit deeper and just to push the lots to the east there, abutting that. There's kind of a tree road right there and then adjacent to the right-of-way there. And then also this would kind of allow that whole street to just move to the east there, and then they would expand the lot widths there, and then it'd provide a little bit more drainage area in between those 2 blocks there. So again, you can kind of see the proposed pre-plat here. So in lieu of sliding this road over to the east, we're able to pick up 2 additional lots as well, which is a great thing, just because Arbor Creek it's developing quickly and lots are selling really quickly. Individuals are wanting more lots out here for sure. So, and then just to kind of speak towards the drainage component to the north here. So this was kind of driven because there's a private agreement between our developer and the property owner to the north. Our developer is needing some more dirt material for these lots along here, so they could allow to build those pads up a little bit more and to provide walkout basements there for these lots. So in exchange, digging out some of this ground for that dirt, we're also producing a little detention area for this owner as well, and to kind of clean up this area to kind of make it, have a nice transition and buffer between 23rd Street into this development as well. And it's also going to improve, drainage throughout this development. Micah mentioned, there's drainage, videos and pictures of these neighbors down here, and that was actually anticipated when MKC kind of designed the first phase. If you look at those pictures, that drainage is within the creek. It's actually kind of within that reserve area. All these lots have minimum pads, but I will say with these improvements, it's gonna help any drainage concerns for this area as well. So I also want to just add that this private detention area, the developer, he's been in communication with the property owner as well as the city, trying to get down this agreement to make sure that everyone's kind of happy with this private agreement. They're meeting this week on it, so should be able to get everything kind of figured out. Also, like I mentioned, we're needing to get lots on the ground. By starting this phase 3, it's also gonna open up this street, because we'll be able to connect that access point to that existing development to the south there, the existing phase there. So it's going to provide that secondary access just for more homes that are coming in. So, so that with that, I would answer any kind of questions that you may have.
Mike, I might just add, if that's okay. I have reviewed the drainage plan and kind of asked, Scott Evans, he was the fellow that, their engineer, the drainage engineer, while this detention does provide some additional detention, it's relatively minor, I think, for this development, but I mean, it does provide some additional detention. I appreciate the synopsis of what you gave, because I understand now I understand better why you're doing what you're doing, I guess. Okay. So the drainage plan, still looked acceptable to me. There was a reduction a slight reduction in the pre-developed versus developed. Now, this is not, and I think I asked this, or might have mentioned this, and Scott agreed with me. This is really not going to improve what those folks saw on the back of their lots in the main creek system. It's not really. It might provide a slight reduction, but as they mentioned, that is a reserve area, and it's specifically sized, the width and such, to handle that 100-year flow event, and the houses are set up high enough to where yes, they saw water flowing back there, but it wasn't threatening their structures. So that's when I have no idea what that rain event was that caused that flow, but they could very well. I mean, it's a creek back there. They could very well see water back there like that, on relatively frequent occasion. But if MKEC, I have to rely on them that the numbers they have provided me, are adequate, and the houses are adequately elevated. Then the view outs, it's not the first floor I'm worried about. It's view outs or walkouts. If they have those along there that are being proposed, that you have to protect from being flooded by those waters. So anyway, and then I think one thing Scott did say, that there may be something and maybe you can confirm this, that there may be some additional improvements in the future. I don't know, what's the phase? Is that another phase on the west side of this drive?
Correct.
There may be some additional improvements west of there that might help that situation some. But I guess I don't want to represent, and I don't think MKC is representing that, hey, that water's going to go away, because it's not going to go away. The water's got to run. That carries water all the way up or captures water all the way up to Industrial Road. And water comes down through the field there in that quarter north of 23rd, and then comes across, and so the water has a place to run. It's just we design around it and make sure that the capacity is there and the structures are set high enough to not get affected by that water. So from a drainage perspective, from what I've seen, I may have some additional questions. You might tell Scott that. Okay. I may have some additional questions, but from what I've seen, it appears that they have addressed what they needed to address with this phase on drainage. So. Is this, just curious, is that a ponding area, the shadowed portion there? Do you know?
That's the 100-year.
That's the 100-year flood event. There's that shaded area.
And I might mention that we have minimum pads. You can kind of, can't read them, but down here for these adjacent lots as well. So all those pads are going to be built up, outside of, out of those drainage concerns. So.
You might. What is your outlet for this off-site detention pond? Where does it run?
Right through here.
Okay. So there'll be storm sewer come through there, or is it open ditch, or?
We're going to have open here, and then it's going to go into a box here.
And then go through there into that reserve or whatever. Okay. So it's as much for drainage as opposed for the additional dirt that you need, probably.
Correct.
That area
that
you mentioned. So.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, guys.
dealt with this off-site detention yet, and all the time I've been here. How does that gonna work? If it's a private landowner,
That's what we're trying to
detain his
figure out.
water on, and he sells it 10 years from now, and I don't wanna detain your water anymore, then where are we at?
Right, and so I think that's where it's contingent upon the final stormwater management engineering requirements. Right now, if I understand Harlan and Joey, if you want to comment on that, but the calculations for that stormwater detention take into account this detention pond. So hypothetically, if this detention pond were to go away, kind of renders that stormwater detention moot because that's part of the calculation. I think we spoke with the developer about this as well, that if they can try to make it work without this detention pond, add 2 lots and not need a detention pond, that would be the most ideal. If it doesn't work that way, and Harlan or Joey, feel free to speak, if 2 more lots, they need this detention pond, or if the detention pond is not necessary for an addition of 2 more impervious. 2 more
That's,
lots.
I don't know if I can answer that question. That's something I'd have to check with MKEC to get more specifics on. But I think we are having a meeting tomorrow with the MKEC and the developer just to nail down how that off-site detention will be handled so that in perpetuity it's attached to this development and this development has responsibility for it. So that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow. So we should have that, I would think, resolved by the time this would go to City Council.
So the HOA would be required to maintain that when they take over?
I think that's the
Detention
city's
pond?
preference. Yes, that's the city's preference.
The city
that
doesn't
the
want to maintain that.
HOA would be
Would
responsible
need it.
for it.
Typically, the reason this came up is because typically detention ponds are in reserves. In those reserves, it says, we'll say Reserve A. It'll show it on the plat as Reserve A or B or whatever, and it'll say Reserve A will be owned and managed by the HOA management company for that. And any heirs or anybody else that takes over at that point, it's that responsibility. And reserves, I mean, they could technically, a reserve could go away if it was replatted, but they're going to stay there because it's on the plat. It'd be difficult to record a vacation of a reserve without the city being aware of that and saying, no, this has to stay a reserve because it's detention. It's a little bit different when it's a private detention because then the city doesn't know how much control we have of that private agreement. So that's why the developer is working with Mr. Agnew, the property owner over here, to make sure that's an ironclad agreement. And then that agreement, whatever it is going to have to go through our attorneys to make sure that our attorneys are also think it's an ironclad agreement. And that's kind of where we are trying to figure that out. And that's why we're asking for it to be approved contingent upon us kind of vetting that portion of it. Because that is part of the calculation, is this detention is meeting the requirements for impervious surface and stormwater management. So we can't really have that detention pond go away because then what does that mean for that portion of the development? And so that's where Harlan and Scott Evans of MKEC comes in, and the developer works with Mr. Agnew, and then our attorneys step in as well and say, well, let's look at this agreement to see, is it going to basically carry water, no pun intended, but carry water for the future, so that nobody would be in danger, especially if there's any of you outs over here, being in danger of being flooded or, having their property be impaired by water and stuff of that nature. So that's kind of where we're making sure we do our due diligence with detention and stormwater management. But to be perfectly honest, we haven't fully vetted that portion yet. So far it's meeting the mathematical requirements, the engineering requirements, but we have to look at the legal requirements, which is what we're going to be looking at over the next couple weeks before it goes to City Council. But if the legal team can make it work, then we think we'd be confident to bring it before council as a final plat, that it meets those requirements.
So do we need to table this until all that's been ironed out?
I would say no, simply because at some point we still have to have the meeting tomorrow. So the planning commission is reviewing it for conformance to the subdivision regulations and making sure that we have everything that we would need. I would say that engineering, they've already reviewed it and everything looks good. It's simply a matter now for pretty much the legal team to say we're okay with it. And then before that happens, after that happens, then it would go to City Council. So Planning Commission is happy with whether the plat is laid out. It's just a matter of a legal question. Then we would take it to the legal team, which is what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks.
So the scope of our decision is more around the stormwater retention than it is around the legality of who owns the property.
Right, so at this point, really, it's just looking at, if you're okay with what they're proposing, which is 2 more lots, which I think everybody's in favor of, because for the developer, it means they can make more money, and for the city, it means more property taxes and more people living in the city. So we're in favor of that. We're just asking that it pass through planning commission, knowing that your recommendation, of course, will have to go before city council for final approval, and that we're gonna have our legal team vetted. And this way, we have that transparency to let everybody know that we are doing the due diligence as a city, that the planning commission is doing their due diligence, that the city engineer and community development director, being myself, and the city attorney, and everyone else involved is doing their due diligence and their fiduciary obligation to make sure that no properties are being inundated with water in the event of storm.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Micah said. I don't have a problem with the drainage plan they've submitted. That's really not an issue. It's more the structure of how they're going to preserve this piece of property for the off-site detention and the legalese that's going to be involved in that. And like Micah says, ultimately, I as an engineer, and even Micah won't be studying that. It'll probably be the city attorney to say, hey, what's the language in this agreement to make sure it stays there, and who maintains it.
The piece of property is only going to increase in price over years.
True, yeah.
It's going to be a detention pond. So I'm okay with everything is as long as legal team says everything's good to go and this isn't something that's going to bite us in the rear in 10 years or that HOA in 10 years.
I can just speak for a second.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's Marvin Schallenberg, he's the developer for the Arbor Creek development. You want the pointer?
Yeah.
The red one, that red light.
I want to thank Micah, you know, this was pulled off the agenda and I called, please put it back on because we're just seem like everything's taking so long and we're trying to get the next phase in or running out of lots. And so I appreciate them keeping it on the agenda, making it, you know, contingent upon us coming up with something tomorrow. But I did want to, you could.
Just that arrow, I think, will take you back.
Left arrow, yeah.
The left arrow will take you back.
Just a couple quick things. You know that water that was coming down here that you saw on that slide? Some of that, a lot of it came, our road ends right here. And all the storm water came down this street and then it dropped in right back here. From the back of the lots, it kind of goes, there's a valley that comes down here, then it goes up and then back into the creek. There was a lot of water that probably wouldn't have been there if when this all gets completed, because our storm water will route this water all into the creek, not some of it in the back of here first, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that'll make a difference. I'm not saying it's going to solve that problem, but I feel very good with what our minimum pad elevation is doing for these houses here. We were out there looking at that river as well when that was occurring. And so, but that's one thing that we saw. A lot of the water came back down through this way. Our goal, and it's one of the things we'll talk tomorrow too, I'd like to have this as a public drainage easement to where the city would maintain that, but there would be all approval through that. And I want to visit with them about it. It's just like if we had trouble down here, this is a reserve, but it's public. And correct me if I'm wrong, Harlan, but wouldn't the city take care of anything that was happening in here to prevent?
I need to read the language on that plat to know, are reserves maintained by the developer or the HOA?
It's maintained by the HOA. Yeah,
maintained by the HOA, but if there was water problems, it wouldn't be through the HOA, it would be through the city.
It depends on what kind of water problems there are.
If there was a blockage or something, you mean?
Blockage, we would work with the developer to make that happen.
I almost think that would be maintenance, but I mean, if there was an emergency situation, the city might have to go out and fix it.
We would have to figure out where the issue is coming from. If the issue's upstream and somebody's blocked, for example, if there's if storm inlets that are blocked in easements in people's backyards, we would go make them unblock it. If there's a blockage in terms of a tree that's in the road or something like that, then yeah, roads are public, we would move the tree. But in terms of the water, what's actually inside that reserve, it's supposed to be owned and managed by the HOA, and I would think that the HOA would be
even up that creek.
Yeah, and that, now
Not
that
the
creek
creek
is
bed.
kind of unique because it's a perennial stream as opposed to a reserve that we have typically, but
Right.
we would have to kind of wrestle with that, and I'm not sure how we, because that one's a perennial stream. This is a unique situation with that pond because it's not a pond, it's a perennial stream.
I would just say, if it says reserves are to be maintained by the HOA,
Typically,
then
yeah.
that's in a reserve, then.
Yeah. But if there's something downstream blocking it,
Yeah.
it's outside city limits or something, we could look at that. If there's something upstream, then we would look at it. But a reserve is in an HOA. If it says it's for the HOA, that's for the HOA.
Okay. Well, worst case scenario, what I'm hoping up here is that we can, it has, as Harlan had mentioned, it has minimal effect on our retention detention. What it does do for me is it clean, right now he uses this as a burn pile area and it's very junky. And I approached him and said, can we build how about, and I needed dirt. And it's a win-win deal for him. He can create a pond that goes here. He has some cattle he wants to have there, a couple of heads. So he said, well, that'd be great to have a pond. I get the dirt. And now if I can make it to where it can't be changed, and it's going to be a permanent detention pond, then that makes a big difference. And that's what I'm going to try to shoot for. But if I can't, worst case, then we have to say we're getting no detention here, and I have to raise my minimum pad, and then I won't have a full walkout, but we could do without this area in the detention in their calculations. And so that, because I'm in this time crunch, I'm trying to do, I got plan A, B, and C, you know, and so I'm trying to, and I'm all for trying to get it as tight as I can, and if it means that we have to, if it's consistent with the HOA maintaining it, then we'll take that on as well. But I'm trying to make that, you know, I meet with the city Tuesday and I meet with him on Thursday. And hopefully, and like I say, worst case scenario is he says, I don't want to do that, then we'll have to plan as though it has no detention. I'll still dig the pond so I get the benefit of the dirt, because I got to be careful. Special assessments are getting very expensive now. And so the closer I have the dirt for what I need, if I have to import it, it's another big cost. And so I would never want to do anything that's going to potentially hurt my homeowners out there. And so I think the net, if we make the assumption that that's going to provide no detention, we'll roll with that if we need to. Does that make sense? Any questions?
No, we're gonna let
Thank you.
this-
Thank you.
Legal's good with it.
They're good, we're good.
I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary replat for Arbor Creek Second Edition contingent upon the final stormwater management engineering requirements.
I'll second.
Which one was that? Okay.
We'll go this side this time. All in favor? Aye.
Very good. Item H4 is the Arbor Creek Phase 3 final replat, which is the same. I call it phase, I know it can be a little, the title is second edition. The phase is phase 3, so if you're seeing that get thrown around, that's why. They have to come up with a different name for the plat, because every plat has to be named something differently to be recorded. So this is the second edition, but technically this is the phase 3 of the development. So phase 1 and 2 are underway, this is the phase 3. And as you can see, that you remove all the sort of erroneous information, which is good to view, but county doesn't necessarily want to see all that. And for final plating, you remove all that erroneous information and leave what's the remainder. Financially non-legally approved as the form. It is recommended the same. That the planning commission approve the final replat of the Arbor Creek Second Edition contingent upon final stormwater management engineering requirements.
Do we have a motion?
I'll motion to recommend the approval of the final replat for the Arbor Creek Second Edition contingent upon the final storm water management engineering requirements.
Who seconded
I'll
that?
second.
Commissioner Hall, thank you very much.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the evening, or if not, have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Harlan, that applies to you too, if you want to take off, but you're welcome to stay for the rest of the night.
I might stay, I
Yeah.
want to talk to you after the meeting.
That's fair, that's fair. Staff report, there is none. Planning Commissioner comments, this would be item J.
No comments.
Nothing.
Well then, item K, this is adjournment. This is the next regular Planning Commission meeting will be October 10th, 2022 at 7 p.m.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me know when we're off.